Brooklyn, New York, 1985. Mike Tyson is 19 years old. Not yet the champion. Not yet famous worldwide, but already dangerous. Already building a reputation in boxing circles as the next big thing. Cus D'Amato, his trainer and mentor, has transformed him from a troubled kid from Brownsville into a focused fighter with devastating power. Tyson has been living with Cus in Catskill, New York, a small town upstate. Training relentlessly. Learning the sweet science. Developing the peekaboo style that will make him unstoppable. Away from the chaos of Brooklyn. Away from the street life that almost destroyed him. Away from the violence and poverty that defined his childhood. But today, he's back in Brooklyn. Has to handle some business. See some people. Take care of things before his next fight. Cus doesn't like when Tyson comes back to Brooklyn. Says nothing good happens here. Says the streets will pull him back in. Says he needs to stay focused on boxing, on the future, on becoming champion. Tyson promises it's just one day, just a few hours. Then he'll return to Catskill. Return to training. Return to the discipline that's changing his life. Early afternoon. Tyson walks down a street in a neighborhood that's not Brownsville. Not his neighborhood. This is a wealthier part of Brooklyn. Professionals live here, families with money, people who don't know what it's like in the projects. The streets are cleaner, the buildings maintained, the people different. Tyson is dressed casually, jeans, t-shirt, jacket, nothing expensive, nothing flashy, just a young black man walking down the sidewalk. But he's already big, already muscular, already carries himself with a presence that draws attention. People notice him. Some cross the street. Some look away. Some stare. He's used to this. Used to people reacting to his size, his build, his skin color. Used to being seen as a threat before being seen as a person. He walks past a small cafe, outdoor seating, white tablecloths, people having lunch. Mostly white customers, well-dressed, comfortable. Living lives completely removed from where Tyson comes from. He's not planning to stop, just walking past. But he's hungry, hasn't eaten since morning. The cafe looks nice, looks welcoming. He thinks, why not? He has money. He's training to be a professional boxer. He's allowed to eat wherever he wants. This is America. This is supposed to be a free country. He approaches the entrance. Before he reaches the door, a man steps out, middle-aged, white, well-dressed, the owner or manager. He looks at Tyson. His expression changes immediately, from neutral to concerned, from welcoming to defensive. He positions himself in the doorway, blocking entry. Says, "Can I help you?" His tone isn't helpful, it's challenging. Tyson says, "I want to eat." The man looks him up and down, takes in the casual clothes, the muscular build, the youth, the blackness, makes calculations, assumptions, decisions, says, "We're full." Tyson looks past him, sees empty tables, at least 4 of them, clearly visible through the window, says, "You got empty tables." The man says, "Those are reserved." Tyson knows what's happening, has experienced this before. Not often, because he usually stays in neighborhoods where he's known, where people recognize him or at least recognize his type. But sometimes, in places like this, in neighborhoods like this, the story is always the same. He says, "Reserved for who?" The man says, "For customers who have reservations." Tyson says, "I can wait." The man's expression hardens. He drops the pretense, says directly, clearly, with complete conviction, "You don't belong here. This establishment serves a particular clientele. I suggest you find somewhere else to eat." The words hang in the air. You don't belong here. Not you can't eat here because we're full. Not we don't have space. Not come back later. You don't belong here. Based on nothing but appearance. Based on assumptions. Based on prejudice so casual, so automatic, the man doesn't even try to hide it. Tyson feels rage building. The kind of rage that used to get him in trouble on the streets. The kind of rage that led to arrests, fights, chaos. The kind of rage Cus has been teaching him to control. To channel into boxing. To use productively instead of destructively. He wants to hurt this man. Wants to show him exactly what happens when you disrespect Mike Tyson. Wants to teach him a lesson about making assumptions. His hands clench. His jaw tightens. The man sees it, takes a step back, but doesn't back down, says, "You need to leave, now, before I call the police." The threat is clear. The implication obvious. A young black man in a white neighborhood. Police won't ask questions. Won't care about his side. Will assume he's the problem. Will handle it accordingly. Other customers are watching now, through the windows. Some with concern, some with approval, most with discomfort at the scene unfolding. Tyson takes a breath, remembers Cuss, remembers the training, remembers that getting arrested ends everything, ends his boxing career before it really starts, ends his chance to become champion, ends the opportunity to escape poverty and violence, all because of some racist cafe owner who thinks he can decide who belongs where. Tyson says quietly, dangerously, "I'm going to be heavyweight champion of the world. You remember this day. Remember you told me I don't belong. Remember my face. Because when I'm champion, when everyone knows my name, you're going to know you disrespected me for nothing. For being black in your neighborhood. That's all." The man smirks, doesn't believe him, says, "Sure, kid, good luck with that. Now leave before I make a call." Tyson turns and walks away. Doesn't run, doesn't slink off, walks with his head up, dignity intact despite the humiliation. He finds a bodega 3 blocks away, buys a sandwich, eats it, standing on the sidewalk. The food tastes like anger, like injustice, like every time he's been judged before anyone knew him, like every assumption made based on skin color, like every door closed before he could knock. He thinks about Cuss telling him that boxing is his way out, that becoming champion changes everything, opens doors that were closed, creates respect where there was only disrespect, makes people see him differently. He promises himself he'll prove that cafe owner wrong, will become exactly what he said he'd become, will force the world to recognize him, will make it impossible to say he doesn't belong anywhere. The incident fuels him. When he returns to Catskill, he trains harder, hits the bag with more intensity, spars with more aggression. Cuss notices but doesn't ask, just watches, just guides, just prepares his fighter for what's coming. Months later, November 22nd, 1986, Tyson becomes the youngest heavyweight champion in history, destroys Trevor Berbick in 2 rounds. At 20 years old, he's on top of the boxing world. The media swarms him. Everyone wants interviews. Everyone wants access. Everyone wants to be close to the new champion. He does the rounds, television shows, magazines, newspapers, radio, everywhere celebrating this young fighter who came from nothing and conquered everything. During one interview, a journalist asks about his motivation, what drives him, what kept him focused through all the training. Tyson thinks about many things, about Cuss, about growing up in Brownsville, about poverty and violence and wanting something better. But he also thinks about that cafe in Brooklyn, about being told he doesn't belong, about the casual cruelty of Prejudice. He doesn't tell that story in the interview, doesn't name the cafe, doesn't seek revenge, just uses it privately, as fuel, as motivation, as a reminder of what he's fighting against, not just other boxers, but every person who looked at him and made assumptions, every door that closed, every time someone decided who he was before knowing him. Over the next few years, Tyson dominates boxing, becomes the most feared heavyweight in the world, destroys opponents, makes millions, becomes a global icon, goes places where no one tells him he doesn't belong, where people compete for his attention, where his presence is desired, celebrated, demanded. He buys expensive cars, expensive houses, expensive everything. Part of it is enjoying success. Part of it is proving something, proving he belongs in any space, any room, any neighborhood. Part of it is overcompensation, using wealth to force acceptance that should never have required wealth in the first place. But the prejudice doesn't disappear, it just changes form. People still make assumptions, still see his skin color before seeing him, still react with fear or suspicion or surprise that he's articulate, intelligent, complex. The wealth insulates him from some of it. Fame creates a buffer, but it's still there, underneath, always. In 1988, Tyson marries actress Robin Givens. The marriage is turbulent, public, destructive. The media covers every fight, every accusation, every drama. Much of the coverage carries racial undertones: the dangerous black athlete, the aggressive thug, the violent man who doesn't belong in civilized society. The narrative isn't new, just amplified by fame. Tyson sees it, feels it, responds by becoming more aggressive, more defensive, more willing to play the role people expect. If they see him as dangerous, he'll be dangerous. If they see him as violent, he'll be violent. If they think he doesn't belong in polite society, he'll reject polite society entirely. It's a spiral, a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more he's treated like a threat, the more threatening he becomes. The more he's excluded, the more he excludes himself. The more he's judged, the more he embodies the judgment. Years later, after the rape conviction, after prison, after the comeback, after the ear-biting incident, after retirement, Tyson does interviews reflecting on his life, on his career, on his mistakes. He talks about growing up poor, about cuss saving him, about losing his way, about hurting people, about regret. In one interview, he mentions experiences with racism, how it shaped him, how it hurt him, how it made him angry. He doesn't tell the cafe story specifically, but he talks about being made to feel like he didn't belong, about doors being closed, about assumptions being made, about fighting against perception his entire life. The interviewer asks if success changed how people treated him. Tyson laughs, says success made people hide their prejudice better, made them smile while thinking the same things, made them welcome him while still seeing him as different, as other, as someone who fundamentally doesn't belong in their world. He says the only place he ever truly belonged was in the ring, where race didn't matter, where wealth didn't matter, where nothing mattered except who could fight, where he could be himself completely, where judgment was based purely on ability. Everything else, he says, was performance, playing roles, meeting expectations, trying to fit into spaces that were never designed for people like him. The cafe incident in Brooklyn wasn't unique, wasn't the worst thing that happened to him, wasn't even particularly memorable in the grand scheme of his life, but it was representative, a single moment that captured a larger truth. That no matter how talented he was, how hard he worked, how much he achieved, some people would always see him first as a young black man who doesn't belong. That prejudice was casual, automatic, defended openly. The cafe owner didn't think he was doing anything wrong, probably told the story to friends proudly, probably felt justified, probably never questioned whether his assumptions were fair or accurate or decent. That's what made it so damaging. Not hatred, not intentional cruelty, just casual exclusion based on appearance, based on neighborhood, based on race. Just the automatic decision that this person doesn't belong here without knowing anything about them. Tyson carried that experience, along with dozens of others like it, carried them through his career, through his championship reign, through his fall and attempted redemption. They shaped him, made him angry, made him defensive, made him dangerous. Not dangerous because he was inherently violent. Dangerous because he'd been treated as violent so many times that it became armor, became identity, became the only way he knew to respond. The tragedy is that Tyson proved the cafe owner wrong and right simultaneously. Wrong because he became exactly what he said he'd become: heavyweight champion, global icon, undeniably successful, someone who forced the world to recognize him. Right because the success came with destruction, with violence that extended beyond the ring, with behavior that seemed to confirm every prejudiced assumption, with a trajectory that allowed people to say, "See, we were right about him all along." It's impossible to know who Tyson would have been without those experiences, without being told repeatedly that he didn't belong, without carrying that anger, without feeling like he had to prove something constantly. Maybe he would have been gentler, maybe more controlled, maybe different, or maybe not. Maybe his path was inevitable. Maybe the violence was always there. Maybe the prejudice just gave it direction. What's certain is that the casual racism Tyson experienced throughout his life mattered, shaped him, hurt him, created wounds that never fully healed. That cafe owner in Brooklyn in 1985 wasn't responsible for Tyson's later actions, didn't make him assault Desiree Washington, didn't create the pattern of behavior that led to prison, but he was part of a system, part of a pattern, part of countless moments where Tyson was judged, excluded, dehumanized based on nothing but appearance. Each moment small, each moment seemingly insignificant, but collectively, devastatingly powerful. After hearing, "You don't belong here," Mike Tyson was a victim of prejudice in public. That's factually true, undeniable. A young man denied service at a cafe because of his race, but that victimization doesn't erase his later actions, doesn't excuse the harm he caused, doesn't absolve him of responsibility. It's possible to hold both truths simultaneously, that Tyson experienced real prejudice, and that he made choices that hurt people, that racism shaped his life, and that he's accountable for what he did, that he was judged unfairly, and that some judgments of his behavior were entirely fair. The cafe in Brooklyn is probably gone now. 35 years later, neighborhoods change, businesses close, people move on. The owner is probably dead or retired. Probably never knew that the young black man he turned away became exactly what he claimed he'd become. Or maybe he did know. Maybe he saw Tyson on television years later, recognized him, realized his mistake. Or maybe not. Maybe he never made the connection. Maybe he turned away so many young black men that they all blurred together. Maybe the prejudice was so automatic he never thought about individual encounters. Either way, that moment mattered. To Tyson, if to no one else. Another reminder that belonging is conditional, that acceptance has requirements, that being seen as fully human isn't guaranteed. That's the weight young black men carry, not just in Brooklyn in 1985, now, today, everywhere. The knowledge that you can do everything right and still be told you don't belong, still be seen as a threat, still be judged before being known. Mike Tyson's story is exceptional in many ways, but in this way, it's common, ordinary, shared by millions. The specifics change. The cafes have different names. The neighborhoods are different cities. But the experience is the same. You don't belong here, based on nothing, assumed automatically, defended openly. That's the prejudice. That's the weight. That's what shapes lives in ways both visible and invisible. Tyson became champion anyway, proved he belonged in the ring at least, forced recognition through violence and skill, but the cost was high, and the question remains, what could he have been without carrying that weight, without fighting against prejudice along with opponents, without needing to prove he belonged? We'll never know. The path he took is the only one that exists. The person he became, flawed and complicated and human, is who he is. The cafe owner in Brooklyn helped create that person, not intentionally, not significantly in isolation, but as part of a pattern, part of a system, part of countless moments of casual cruelty that accumulate into something crushing. After hearing "You don't belong here," Mike Tyson was a victim. That's true, and insufficient, because what he did with that victimization, how he carried it, how he let it shape him, how he used it to justify his worst impulses, that's on him. Both things are true. Both things matter. Both things are part of the same complicated story.